Right now, the day's biggest news stories from a Vegas perspective. This is the Vegas Take with Sharp and Shapiro.
All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take. Sharp and Shapiro rolling out the red carpet for hour number 3. Also broadcasting live on YouTube. It's the Vegas Take page. So glad you could join us. It's been an interesting several weeks. Well, it's been an interesting several years for UNLV football, but particularly the last several weeks. As you know, UNLV head football coach Tony Sanchez has been let go. He was told a few weeks before the season ended, and I figured what better person to talk about this than our in-studio guest, who is a former UNLV quarterback. In fact, he is the last quarterback to bring UNLV to a bowl game, and he is also the color commentator for UNLV football. That is Caleb Herring. Caleb, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it. How are you?
Oh, I'm good, man. No problem. It's always good to get on the air. You know?
Always appreciate it. I want to get to this Nevada-Reno game first in that fight because I know you were there to watch that. But before we get to that, let me give you my quick, I'll try to do it under 1 minute, my full opinion, because Twitter doesn't do justice sometimes,
right,
of the whole Tony Sanchez situation. Okay, start to finish. I believe when they decided to tell him 2 weeks before the season ended, the day before the San Jose State game, that was ridiculous. To me, there is no reason why you couldn't wait till the end of the year to do that. It was a distraction. I think Francois made a big mistake. I thought it was a ridiculous decision, number one. Number two, I do think letting him go was the right decision based on the record. A 19-40 record over 5 years to me is completely unacceptable. Did he do some good things? Sure. But Ed Grandy writes in the Review Journal, he did everything right but win. I disagree with that. Here's why. He did not recruit at the level that he needed to recruit on. That will help you win. That's not just winning. You have to recruit. Mm-hmm. Him and his coaching staff did not do the job they needed to do. The fan support has been dropping every year. When you go to a game and you see 4 times more Hawaii fans than UNLV fans in Sam Boyd Stadium, that's a problem. Right. The fan support has been bad. I don't see improvement with this team from a talent standpoint and a wins and losses standpoint. And we all know this. And I think I'm speaking, logical here when I say you hire a coach not for the main reason of improving your facilities or getting donors to donate to the program. That could be a part of it. I thought that was what an athletic director was supposed to do. You hire a coach.
Whoa.
Yeah. I thought you hire a coach to win football games. And I look, didn't have to happen in year 1, didn't have to happen in year 2, maybe even not year 3. But his best season was 5-7, take it the year they lost to Howard. So I'm sorry, I went a little longer than a minute there. That is and by the way, I like Tony Sanchez. Yeah. He's a good person. I was rooting for him because I like the guy. Right. He's very well liked. He's a good dude. He got destroyed at halftime. You talking second half adjustments? He got destroyed.
Well, but it's an issue because you bring a coach from Bishop Gorman who never really came from behind in the second half, who always had the best talent.
Yeah.
I mean, you put him in a lose-lose situation. How is he supposed to be successful where you have to come back from behind in the second half?
Caleb, this is why I wanted you here. The floor is yours, my friend.
Okay, so a couple of things. I'm going to start off with saying I think I also agree that Tony's a good guy. And he's easy to root for, especially the way he handles the media. He was very savvy and very respectful and he took ownership of what was going on throughout the seasons, throughout the years that he was losing and he wasn't getting it done as far as that goes. So rooting for Tony as a good guy. There's a couple of things you said that I want to address. I don't see moving on from Tony as the wrong decision. I don't advocate that he should still be the coach. If that's the decision to move on, let's just get that out of the way first. I agree. You can make this decision as a program and move forward.
And do you agree with me 2 weeks before the season? That's ridiculous.
2 weeks before the season, I think there was no reason for it.
Yeah, why would Caleb, why would they do that?
I think it was – this is why sports in college football, as far as college football, is very much so political because that was for the aesthetics of thing. I think – to avoid a situation where what happened to end the season exactly the way it happened, winning San Jose State and winning at Reno and keeping the Cannon Ray for the 3rd time out of 5 years, the aesthetics of firing that coach to the boosters, to those that support the program, may have been a little bit harder. Firing him when he has a 2-win season and he's completely out of contention for a bowl game and there's no positive spin on things makes more sense for the aesthetics of it. But outside of that, there's no strategic, there's no program advantage to fire him
to the players.
It's unfair to the players, unfair to him.
Staff.
So now he has to coach the 2 games, one game knowing that he's fired and hasn't told anybody, and then the last game going into the rival's place, now everybody knows. It's kind of embarrassing, humiliating kind of thing.
So
why drag him through that?
You think that maybe they were afraid that he was going to beat San Jose State, and he was going to beat UNR, and then had he ended the season 4-8, that it would be more difficult to actually fire him?
Absolutely. I think aesthetically it would have been. I think if you're going hard-nosed that winning was the measure, it's easy. You can say you didn't get the bowl game. I told you before the season you have to get to a bowl game.
Whatever happened to having a backbone and just doing what's right for the program? Who cares
you
what
can't
it looks
do that
like?
for aesthetics because, like I said, it's more political than people would like to think. It's a kind of a power struggle at points when it comes to a program and who's really in control of a program and having that aesthetic.
Okay,
so that's what I agree with you there.
Okay.
We agree there. There's a couple of things that I don't agree with, and it's for a complex reason. I think the recruiting thing I'll talk about first. Recruiting, I think, is a hard thing to measure when you're talking about being the coach at UNLV. Success as far as recruiting. If you're comparing the success of a recruiting standpoint for a head coach based on certain metrics, like say the ratings coming out of high school, 5-star, 4-star recruit, whatever that is, or if you're comparing it to how your players, once they get to college, perform against other conference opponents, or are you comparing it to a national scale? Like what's the comparison there? And then if you're going to compare recruiting, the most important thing these days in recruiting is what you're working to recruit. Like what do you have as your tools in the toolbox? You obviously don't have winning at UNLV yet. That hasn't been the case for 15 to 20 years. That winning is the thing you could say we're winning.
Except
program.
that 1 year you got them to a bowl game.
Yeah, but you use that maybe for a year and a half.
Right.
But after that, it's like, okay, we can't ride that anymore. But you haven't been a winning program. There's no historic winning.
But Caleb, he's coming
there.
from Bishop Gorman. He has contacts.
Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So he's gotten Gorman guys to UNLV. So if that's the metric, he's done that. If you want to talk about the best recruiting classes in UNLV history, he's had the best recruit commit to UNLV and come to UNLV. Vic Ramonta is the highest rated recruit in UNLV history. So based on UNLV coaching standpoint, he succeeded there. And then if you look at the metric of how successful they've been in college, the last 2 years he's had two of the top running backs in the conference. Charles Williams just got named all first team Mountain West of the conference. He the offensive player, the running back, led the conference in rushing, yards per game, yards per attempt, and yards on the season.
And I agree with that. But do you think he's recruited at a high enough level though to win and get to bowl games? I don't think he has.
And here's the thing. That's why it's a complicated situation. I think for the job at UNLV head coach, he's done recruiting about as best as you can do as far as developing guys he's got and making them into successful college players. There's
Armani Rogers declined as a head quarterback. He did not get better.
No, as a quarterback?
Yeah.
Or first of all, Armani Rogers hasn't played a complete healthy season. He's only had 4 or 5 games on each of his seasons.
I'm just going by the games that he played.
He's led the conference in rushing as a quarterback for all of those seasons.
But he can't throw the football, and he has not gotten
better.
That's
fine. Like I said, that's fine. They still had an offense that averaged 28 points per game during Armani Rogers' time. Part of it, I think, is because of Coach Cotton, but he played and maximized Armani Rogers' talent. They were 2 wins away from a bowl game. 2 wins that I think they should have had. Up against Reno, Armani Rogers had a great game. They lost that in a comeback fashion when Reno won it. And then the Howard loss, which was absolutely disastrous. I don't think you blame a loss that bad, that lopsided, on a coach. I think players got to come out and play. You got to, at some point, say, okay, players didn't perform this game. Those 2 games keep him out of bowl game. And we're not even having this discussion because if he goes to that bowl game, he gets an extension and we're not here right now. So I think he's done a good job as far as maximizing the situation at UNLV. You can't compete in conference or nationally on a recruiting scale with what UNLV had as their facilities. I'm talking about Sam Boyd Stadium, and I'm talking about the practice facility not being done. You can't compete. You can't ask a guy to come get the best recruiting class in the conference with that as what he's using to recruit
that's
guys.
An interesting thing you're talking about now, because let's talk about that for a second, and I'm going to correlate to the basketball program. Okay, Lon Kruger brought us the Mendenhall. Okay, the UNLV basketball has, and I know this is not football, but UNLV has probably some of the best facilities for basketball. What has the UNLV basketball program done since Lon Kruger left and since they got Mendenhall? The answer is nothing. They haven't won one NCAA tournament game. No. Menzies couldn't get them even to the NCAA tournament, and now they're starting the year, at 4-6. But so that is why
have they had a top recruiting class?
Yes, Dave Rice, absolutely.
And so this is my point. But they still didn't win. But they had the facilities to get good recruiting classes.
You didn't have the right coaches in place to do it.
But like I'm saying, I'm just talking about the recruiting aspect here. You still had the tools in place to get recruiting, a winning history, albeit ancient history in the 90s. But you still use that as the champion success of Rebel basketball. This is a basketball school.
Look, I understand
and you
what
had
you're
the Mendenhall Center. So recruiting-wise, what you had something in place to get recruits. You don't have that with football at UNLV. You've never had that until now, and that's thanks to Tony. You have a facility that's top-notch that you can use as a recruiting tool. The Mendenhall Center was still used as a recruiting tool after Kruger left. Like Dave Rice did a great job recruiting, had one of the top recruiting classes in the nation in a couple of his seasons, and it just never panned out to wins and losses. So I'm talking about sheerly recruiting. If you're going to grade Tony on that, I think he did good with what the tools that he had to use.
You could say he did good. I'm going to say he didn't do good enough, because if he recruited at a higher level,
they would have
won more football games. Okay, so we disagree.
And he got kids from Gorman, but did he get highly ranked players from Gorman?
He did not, and that's probably one of them. He got more
the Tate Martells, the DeMarco Murray type of players.
There's been the kind of talk about keep Vegas kids in Vegas, and it's like, well, you don't really want to keep everybody in Vegas because not everybody's what you need. Not everybody's good enough to play at this level, so it's not necessarily just
and if you're overfilled at wide receiver, you don't need a wide receiver.
And that's I think
whatever
part
the
of that
situation is.
Part of whatever the situation. What do you need? What is your need? If you have a quarterback already, you're not going to go get the best quarterback at Gorman because you already have one.
Make no mistake about it. I'm not saying this is easy. This is difficult. He was
tough.
But you're also getting paid a lot of money.
I will say this: what we've talked about Tony Sanchez here. I mean, the things that he's done, developing, creating, or getting the money for the new facilities, et cetera, et cetera. These are things that an AD does. Would you endorse Tony Sanchez as the AD of UNLV, Caleb?
He would never want that. He wants to be a football coach, but yeah.
I think that would discredit a lot of what he has as a head coach. Because athletic director, like I said, is more political than anything. I think being the coach and the personality of a head coach, he has it. I'm not doubting. I think if number one of the most underrated, under-talked about things of the season is if he had his coordinator, who was his offensive coordinator, the only year that they have not averaged 28 points or more is this year, and that's when Barney Cotton had his health issues and couldn't be around. So I think Tony's a good head coach as far as being able to handle the administrative side of things and orchestrate the behind-the-scenes part, but I think he didn't have strong enough coordinators to get things done, and that's kind of what's going to go into this new coach search. So you got to get a good head coach, yes, but you have to have room for good coordinators because that's who
you hear
gets
this, Caleb, and by the way, if you're just joining us, it's Caleb Herring, former UNLV quarterback. We're talking about the UNLV football coaching situation, the firing of Tony Sanchez. When you think about coaching, there's a lot goes into it, recruiting, getting your team prepared, halftime adjustments. I thought where Tony Sanchez failed more than anything.
This season.
Not just this season. I think in his 5 years here as a whole.
Okay, so I want to clarify something. Is anybody under the impression that the head coach makes halftime adjustments?
I'm not in the listen, you got the offensive coordinators, you got the defensive coordinators. I totally understand that. But who do you look at when you say your staff didn't do a good enough job with halftime adjustments? You have to look at your head coach because he's running the show. If something is not working, then you have to hold your head coach accountable.
And the lapses this year were defensively. They weren't offensively in the second half.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, so the thing about it is, like, when you talk about making halftime adjustments, I think, yes, the head coach has an impact on that. The guys that are making the adjustments need to answer to the head coach. And if the adjustments aren't being made, if that's the issue, and I think looking at film and breaking things down, more often than not, the issue is not schematic with UNLV, defensively especially. It's missed tackles, guys being in the right place and not doing the right thing, or guys being in position to make a play and not making said play. That's more of the issue that I've seen with UNLV over my years covering them, over watching them pass. It's not necessarily schematics. You can get guys in the perfect position. How many runs do we see where multiple broken tackles led to a touchdown? It wasn't
plenty.
There wasn't a lot. This season there wasn't a lot of just guys wide open.
I will agree, but how many times did we always see in that first drive of the second half where UNLV's offense struggled to move the ball down the field?
I disagree. I saw a lot of plays, a lot of games where they actually moved the ball effectively and just didn't finish in the end zone. Against Northwestern, they came out of the gates in a close ball game at halftime and drove right down the field, marched it down into the red zone, and just didn't punch it in. Mm-hmm. I saw that happen again against Reno. This last game, they drove all the way down the field and just didn't punch it in. So, that's you come out with a game plan in the second half, and it worked oftentimes, but it just, for whatever reason, the plays and the key situations are being made. It's a game of inches. We're inches away in this from talking about a bowl-eligible team. San Diego State hitting the upright on a game that could have went to overtime, playing them well. Hawaii, a game that the defense created all kinds of turnovers and just couldn't come out of the game on top. Those two games, and you're talking about bowl eligibility. And Arkansas State, albeit they got their tails handed to them.
They win those two games.
You win those two games. I think he's safe. I think he's safe.
You really think you should give him a 3-year extension because they win those two games and he's what, 21 and 38?
I'm not going to say you should, but I'm saying that answers the question of, in my opinion.
Okay, but listen.
The only thing he didn't do well enough was win. He did things good enough to be a head coach still, but he didn't win games. And that's not all on him necessarily. It's not on him being a terrible coach or anything like that, but they just didn't win. And I get that being the measure of success, but also at the same time, you can fire somebody or move on from somebody because they didn't win, and he still did everything else good. But you just wanted the win.
JD, I got one more question, then you take over the rest of the segment. I just got one.
Oh, that's fine.
I got one more for Caleb, okay? I promise. Okay, so we've been talking a lot, myself and JD, about some of the articles that have been written over the course of the last few weeks. Ray Brewer and Ed Graney.
Right.
One quote from Ed Graney: he did everything here right at UNLV but win. Completely disagree with that statement. He didn't do everything right.
Clearly, Caleb has read that.
And then Ray Brewer, who I like, by the way. I think Ray Brewer is a really nice guy, and he's done our show before. And I had a talk with Ray off the air. And Ray Brewer said everything Tony Sanchez did here is nothing short of phenomenal. Yes, he used the word phenomenal. And then he said, don't let the 19-40 record and no bowl appearances fool you. What the hell does that mean?
That, to me, that speaks from being involved in the program, both as an athlete and now like in my post-career life. I know that being the head coach of UNLV is not – you can ask the last 4 coaches that coach here. It's not just about wins and losses. There's something else to turning a program around, especially at UNLV. Mm-hmm. I think to say what happened at UNLV through a certain lens, and I'll just say Ed and everybody else who's written the optimistic spin on this thing. It's just an angle that people are taking, and it is a plausible angle. It's not something that should be stomped out completely. They can take this angle if they choose to, and I personally choose to agree with most of it. That there's a positive spin to what Tony's done for the program as far as everything outside
saying
of
that there's
wins
a
and
positive
losses.
spin is one thing, but saying he did everything
so
nothing short phenomenal.
So this is my point.
Yeah.
The phenomenal aspect of this, where I would say that word is warranted, is a $36 million facility that is being invested on by public donations does not happen unless it's a phenomenal effort by someone.
Because
Tony
he had relationships
is the one,
with the Fertittas.
So it's the right coach for the right time for that task. For getting that done, nobody but Tony gets it done. That's why it's phenomenal. Absolutely, unequivocally, there's nobody in the history of the program or nobody that you can hire in the future outside of, maybe an Urban Meyer or something like that gets that done.
But if you wrote an article and you said that,
on a losing program.
But if you wrote an article and you said that, I would agree with you. Okay, listen, what he did here with getting this money is phenomenal.
Right.
But that's not what Ray Brewer said. What he said was, as a whole, everything what he did is nothing short of phenomenal. Don't let the 19-40 record fool you. What you said is very different than what Ed Graney said and what Ray Brewer said. These are people that cover the program just like you do.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that you've said so far that I completely disagree with.
Right.
What I don't like is one side or the other, and a lot of people make the case that he should have stayed. Obviously, you're not on that side.
Yeah.
And we're being honest.
I'm not on the side that's saying he should have been gone. I'm on the side that's saying
you understand
what UNLV needs is consistency.
Right.
I don't think a coaching change is going to get you wins if that's what you're looking for next year. It's not. You're not going to win in 2020 if you're thinking that the coaching change is all that needed to happen at UNLV for that to happen, to get a winning program. Because you've changed coaches 4 times over the last 15 seasons, and you have not won. Mm-hmm. Changing coaches doesn't get programs turned around. Tony Sanchez turned the program around and put it on the right path to getting to a winning season. He's not going to be there to see it come to fruition. And I don't think the next guy is going to have it instantly if that's the expectation. But you're on the right track now to competing in the Mountain West with recruiting, because that plays a part in winning, to getting more fan support, to getting butts in seats.
You think the fan support will be there next year? Because I'm not a believer
if you look
in
at the fan support over the last 5 years, it dipped, as with all of college football, has been on a steady decline since 2013. But if you look at UNLV, actually went up this past season to 19,000 from 17,000 on average for home games. So average this season actually saw a boost in support.
Okay, but
and I
let's
think
be
it's
honest
because
here.
of Tony Sanchez, honestly.
Hold on.
The excitement created by Tony Sanchez.
Caleb, come on.
19,000 was the average. Over 19,000
Come on,
was
you're
the
a
average.
smart guy.
For Sam Boyd Stadium.
There is no chance that they had 19,000 people in that arena in any game this year.
For a game, there was.
I don't buy that.
There was at least 2 that were over 20,000.
It certainly wasn't UNLV fans, that's for sure.
I mean,
I am not buying that at
when
all.
you cash
attendance is attendance. Though.
When you cash the check, when you write the check, does it matter how much money came from other fans or your fans?
I guess.
So one part of the article that I was really confused by that Ray Brewer wrote was he said that Tony Sanchez instituted a nutritional table for the players. What does that even mean?
Okay, so this is part of
Raising
why
canes.
no, that's actually the opposite of what it means.
Tell me it wasn't CC's.
So from being a part of the program, every other major football program that I know about has a nutrition system, a nutritionist that has diets for these guys, which is why they come out on the field looking like shredded behemoths of monsters.
Absolutely.
So UNLV has never had that.
How is that possible?
Because UNLV has not made the investment to do that. This is what I'm saying. Like, these are the things that got instituted, that it was a part of the program turning around, that nobody that's not involved intimately with the program would realize is a big deal. The fact that the kids that play football have to walk across campus, swipe a card, and get a limited trade just like any other person who doesn't play college football would get. All right, that's what UNLV athletes had to deal with. As far as football players, there is a certain level of nutrition when you have a 12-hour day.
Obviously.
You work out twice a day. You have this rigorous weightlifting and conditioning schedule and these games that you have to – a calorie minimum is what you need, and an actual scientific approach to your nutrition is necessary. They haven't had it.
And you're growing.
You're growing. You want to grow these guys.
22 years old.
You're a growing boy.
Yeah,
you need
literally.
to eat your meat and potatoes. You need something. So UNLV hasn't had it. They now have it right in their own facility where they won't have to go share with every other student that's just coming from class at 8 a.m.
That's so embarrassing.
They'll be able to have their own dining commons, basically, which is what they have now with the Fertitta complex.
All right, so
did Bishop Gorman have that though?
I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
I bet they did.
I would not be shocked.
I would imagine they probably did.
At least meal plans.
Yes, that is the voice of UNLV football, color commentator Caleb Herring, also the last quarterback to bring UNLV to a bowl game. So when we come back, I'm going to ask Caleb about grade point averages. How important is that for the UNLV football program? Do fans and boosters really care about that sort of thing? We'll get into the weeds of that as well. And then I will ask Caleb, what is the direction Francois should go in hiring the next UNLV football coach? I will ask him that as well. And we'll also take your phone calls on this. What are your thoughts? Do you agree with Caleb that, hey, it wouldn't have been a horrible thing if Sanchez came back and they're close and that the program is improving and Tony Sanchez is responsible for that? Or do you take my side on this issue, and do you think that not only was this the right thing to do to fire Tony Sanchez, but the program is not on the road to recovery? And just because they do have these amazing facilities doesn't necessarily mean that this program is on the right route to win football games and get into bowl games. Do you think the fan support is there? Your thoughts on UNLV football? The number to call, 702-257-5396. Question or comment for Caleb or ourselves, give us a buzz. Again, that number is 257-5396. So we're take a quick break. We'll be back right after this with Caleb Herring talking UNLV football. You're listening to the Vegas Take right here on the all-new 101.5 FM, 720 AM KDOM. All right, welcome back. It's the Vegas Take, Sharp and Shapiro. That quote reminds me of some writers in Las Vegas. You can't question them, right, JD? You can't question an article. God forbid you question King Ed Graney and he's going to come at you, man. You can't do it, right? You can't do it.
You don't mess with King Edward.
No, you can't do it. Anyway, welcome back to the show. We got Caleb Herring in studio, former UNLV quarterback in the last one, to bring UNLV to a bowl game. I almost said Super Bowl. I was thinking NFL there for a second.
Might as well have been.
But, maybe some people don't realize this about you, but you have a very successful career in law enforcement. You are a police officer here in Vegas. How's that going?
It's going good. I mean, that's a job that will always have, a need, I guess. So I'm pretty good as far as needing to be employed. So that's good, I guess. So I don't
want to get into the weeds.
I'm safe and all that stuff.
I don't want to get into the weeds on your position as a police officer, but I feel like I have to ask you like one or two quick questions because we've had Mayor Carolyn Goodman on the show talking about this new homeless ordinance, right? Yeah. Where a homeless person could get up to a $1,000 fine and go to jail for up to 6 months. We all know that the homeless problem across the country, certainly in Las Vegas, it's an issue, right? Can you tell me just in general terms, what are your dealings with people that are homeless? How does that go? And how do you even deal as a police officer with a situation like that when you see people sleeping on the streets and you know now that they're breaking the law? How do you deal with that?
Well, I think criminalization of the homeless is one of those things that is more of, I think, a socioeconomic issue than it is a criminal justice issue. So I think that's one thing to say on it. I understand the initiative to try to clean up the streets, so to speak, and try to prevent it. In my dealings with homeless, I think there is a strand of the population that is homeless that actually appreciates being arrested, and that if when times are rough, when conditions are rough, it's a way to get some safety for a little bit, to get out of the streets for a little bit. When shelters aren't available, and I think that's the main part about this is that there are shelters, there are options available to actually get out of the streets and be off the streets for the night. The only time that this, from my understanding of it, the only time that this will actually be enacted is when the shelters are deemed full, and that's when it'll be the initiative of the officers to go out and make arrests for people sleeping on the streets.
Have you had to do that?
No, I have not.
I'm glad to hear that. I hope that doesn't happen because, as you know, our jails are not designed for that.
They're not designed. There's mental health issues that go along with homelessness that almost are always hand in hand. So I think, like I said, that's more of a socioeconomic and health related issue than it should be thrust on criminal justice. And I think a lot of people maybe unnecessarily are demonized for their life situations that ever got them there. And then, of course, there's those that are taking advantage of it, and that can become a part of the criminal element because they're homeless. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and act like there aren't crimes that happen, like robbery and theft and things like that, or burglarization of homes that are because of homelessness and because
or squatting right in front of a business and taking a dump.
Been super tough about a
lot of defecation
in Las Vegas. The defecation everywhere. That would be bad.
That's awful
in the streets. But no, it's one of those things that you as a government you have to try to find something to do about it. And I think opening more shelters and doing that, and then also a healthier socioeconomic environment helps with this.
Well, and Vegas is trying to evolve from not just a tourist destination, but we're trying to get a Super Bowl. We're trying to get some major businesses put in their headquarters here, and you have to clean up these streets for that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a problem nationwide that different cities and states are trying to find a way to get a handle, and this is just the way we're trying. And I think we'll see how it works out next year.
We'll get back to football in a second. One more question. So we've been talking a lot about this George Zimmerman situation where Zimmerman is now suing the Trayvon Martin family for $100 million.
Right.
My take on this whole situation, and I said it earlier, was that Zimmerman should have never followed him, but the law stated that he did not break the law. He didn't do anything wrong, even though he didn't abide by the 911 dispatcher. And I think Zimmerman is a complete moron, and the fact that he's suing the family for $100 million makes him even a bigger moron. I wish he would just go away. What did you make of this case? And when people say that Zimmerman is a murderer, what is your reaction to that?
Well, at first, this case specifically, we talked about it before I came on the air, is one of those things where it happened is just as important as what happened and all the facts around it. Because of where it happened, there are rules and laws in place that you can manipulate or use to your favor in this situation. I think the more you learn about George Zimmerman and what he's done in the aftermath, the more you make it probable in your head that he manipulated the system in Florida to make this happen. That he intended with every bone in his body for something to happen. I'm not saying he wanted to kill somebody that night, but I'm just saying his vigilante, I guess, approach to this whole situation caused it.
Do you get that a lot where you get wannabe police officers? Because I believe Zimmerman has always been a wannabe police officer. Do you have to deal with people like that want to take matters into their own hands? And you say, you're not a cop, dude. What are you doing?
Well, you know what? There's people that do it, but I've never seen it on this big of a scale, like where George Zimmerman took it onto his own hands. When a law enforcement agent that's telling you stop, I think most people would stop there.
Of course.
So I've never encountered it where somebody kept going and it led to something this big and wanted to be. And if you did, you should be enlisting in an academy somewhere. You shouldn't be out on the streets walking around with your pistol in your pocket. So
of course.
That's what I would say.
But he didn't break the law when he just simply didn't obey the police dispatcher's advice, correct?
No. Not necessarily.
If he broke the law, he'd be in jail right now.
If he broke it, that's not necessarily breaking the law. I mean, whatever happens, you have the freedom of movement. He wasn't under arrest. It's not like the dispatcher is not carrying. I'm not sure if the dispatcher in Florida in that county is actually a sworn officer. So I don't think you can say that he disobeyed a lawful order from an officer in that situation. So
what? Last question in regards to what you do for a living as a cop, and then because that's not why I wanted you to have you in here. Yeah. But I do find it fascinating what you do for a living. What do you think is the biggest issue that you face when you wake up every morning, put on that uniform and go to work? Something that you need that you don't have. The biggest issues that you face out there as a police officer in Las Vegas that you feel like needs to be addressed immediately?
Wow. I don't think it's specific to Las Vegas, but I think it's all law enforcement everywhere, a relationship with the community that you police. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, there's just a bit of connection with the public in general. I think a lot of what we do as law enforcement is based on trust. Just going out in your job and putting the uniform on in itself is a trust thing where I have to trust that people are okay with the fact that I'm here. And a lot of times you don't know that. Going out and trying to do your job, you come onto a scene of something. You don't really know who's on your side. You don't know who the good guy is. You have to figure that out first before you get your job. Of course.
And I guess this question goes into that. Does it bother you when people rush to judgment? For example, when a white police officer shoots an African-American male or female,
right,
and nobody has all the evidence or all the specifics. I'm going to go back to Ferguson for a second. And people put up this, hands up, don't shoot thing, and that was that based on the evidence that didn't happen. And now that police officer's life is changed forever, right? That guy can't be a cop anywhere the rest of his life. And for all intents and purposes, the evidence showing he didn't do anything wrong. Now, with that being said, there are officers that commit crimes. There's no question. No officer is perfect. But I've always said this, the majority of police officers like yourself are heroes. You guys do a great job to protect and serve, and you should be commended for that. But does it bother you, no matter what the color of someone's skin is, when people rush to judgment and always assume that it must have been race and the police officer must have done it for that reason?
Right. Rushing to judgment is never good on either side. I think on one side, rushing to judgment and saying that the officer was always right, that happens as well. And then rushing to judgment, of course, on the side of the court of public opinion, there's always that kind of rush to judgment to say the officer was wrong. And I think in law enforcement, these split-second decisions are very difficult to make. One, I think people need to be understanding of that. So rushing to judgment is never a good idea. Two, I have to say, you'd be remiss in America, especially, to be numb or to not consider the racial aspect of these things, because race in America is important. I know we all wish that it wasn't, and I, for one, wish that it wasn't, but we have a history of race being important. I mean, if you think back 40, 50 years, literally law enforcement was dispatched to separate and remove people of color from institutions. So I think it's without question that will always be ingrained in the community, I think, as a part of the history. So I'm not saying that means you're entitled to rush to judgment and say that that's the cause of every interaction between
It's okay to ask questions. There's no question.
So it's okay to be skeptical, but rushing to conclusions before all the evidence that especially in 2019 when evidence-based criminal justice is kind of taking over and we have the forensic science and knowledge and capability and everybody has a camera these days, I think everybody would be better off to kind of let all the things play out. There's institutions in place to discover evidence and find out what actually happened from a law enforcement standpoint.
Let the system work.
Let it work. I think there's reason with that to not trust the system. I get it. But right now, until we fix the system and make it a more perfect system, then it's the best we have. And I think we should give it time to at least run its course before we rush to judgment.
I agree. Well said. Have you ever, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but have you ever seen a police officer act or in a fashion that you wouldn't have acted and maybe wrongdoing where you had to speak up and say, hey, you know,
that's not happened. I'm young in my career. It's never happened to me where I've had to say that I've watched a fellow officer do something that I wouldn't have done and that I wanted to stop. No.
That's good to hear. All right, let's move on to some fun stuff now. He's Caleb Herring, former UNLV football quarterback, the last quarterback to get UNLV to a bowl game. Let's move on to the fun stuff now. Okay, so we just got a text from a friend of mine. His name is Steve, and Steve's listening to the show. And you talked about the attendance of UNLV football. And you said they're averaging between 17,000 and 19,000. Steve sends me a text message, and he says, 19,000 UNLV average attendance. May I please bet the under, sir? No effing way. Okay, respond to that.
Well, I mean, you take a look at what actually happened this season and the games that were played at Sun Boyd Stadium. You had a top-ranked Boise State team that came into town. There's always excitement around Rebel football in the beginning stages of the season, so you get a good draw for that. And the Hawaii game was also at San Boyd. So that's 3 of the games right there that went over 20,000 that I know that I was there and the attendance was announced. So I mean, those 3 in itself. And the crowds weren't that bad this season. I've seen where they're bad, and attendance is a problem.
Basketball is a huge issue
especially,
right now.
And I think San Boyd Stadium is a deceptive stadium because it's kind of the shape of it, the bowl, it's supposed to fit 35,000. So if you don't pack it out, it kind of looks empty. And then when it comes down to it, it's not always UNLV fans that are the draw that are coming out and supporting. It's not. That's not what I'm at all saying by the fact that ticket sales were up. But San Boyd Stadium was in its farewell tour this season, so attendance did spike a little bit. It was up.
Fair enough. And by the way, a quick reminder, former UNLV quarterback Kenny Mayne, Sports Center superstar, will be joining us on the show Wednesday. And we saw him. I'm going to ask him if he thinks he's bad luck showing up to a game and then all of a sudden the coach gets fired. So I'll ask
they
Kenny
won.
Mayne.
The game was they won.
They
the game.
did win the game, but then the coach gets fired. So I'm going to ask him. Hey, Kenny,
technically, he was fired before Kenny Mayne got there.
That's true. The day before. That's true.
That's
true. But I'm still going to hold him partially responsible for that. But no, Kenny Mayne will be joining us on Wednesday to talk about that. You have a tough job. And the reason why you have a tough job, for example, you're doing the Arkansas State game this year, right? They just got belted by Arkansas State. That was a must-win, I felt, for them to make a bowl game. They had to win that game. Yeah. Take me back to the Howard game for a second. I know this is not a very enjoyable subject for you to talk about, okay?
No, it is
but
not.
They were 50-point favorites. It is arguably the biggest point spread loss in the history of college football, right?
Right.
Yeah. How the hell are you broadcasting that game like you're witnessing it before your eyes? Like,
Yeah.
what is going through your mind during that game, and how are you able to keep your composure without, like, what the hell is going on here? How are you able to do that?
Well, the first thing is you tell the truth. I think there's nothing you can do to hide that, and I think trying to hide it, you only put yourself in a pretty tough spot as a broadcaster or anybody involved. If you try to hide the fact that they're getting destroyed and they shouldn't be. That's the first part about it. And then you focus on the game. I think a lot of times you get caught up in the emotions of the fact that as a fan watching or anybody who's listening to the broadcast, the fact of what's happening is emotional, and you're angry or you're upset about it or maybe sad about it, whatever the emotions are that you're feeling about it. Getting caught up in that, I think, is the wrong way to go, because then your broadcast turns into this soliloquy about what UNLV Rebel football should be and how this is terrible, and you maybe say knee-jerk things like, oh, the coach should be fired immediately, and things like that start to happen when you focus too much on. I think what those blowout games do is, as a former player and as somebody who thinks the game through, I enjoy thinking the game through. I look for reasons why this is happening during the game, and I focus my broadcast on that. Like,
And you do a good
these
job.
plays are not going right. This is why UNLV is losing. This is something that they didn't account for. This player in that situation, Cam Newton's younger brother, was not on anybody's scouting report as far as what he was going to. You can focus on things like that as your topic
Sure.
of or your narrative for the broadcast,
Yep.
instead of going down how bad this is as a point spread loss and the biggest.
No, and you
upset
do it.
in
Listen, you
NCAA
do a
history.
really good job of doing that. I listen to you all the time. Let me ask you this: if you're sitting in a room alone with Francois,
Yeah.
what are the type of things that you would say to her as a former quarterback at UNLV? You take pride in what you do in the university. I know you do. You
Yeah.
have a lot of passion. I believe Francois made some mistakes already since she's been here, and we don't need to list every single one of them. But I think offering students free tacos to try to lure them into UNLV basketball games is not the answer. I just think that is an issue. I think she's
Right.
made
Very
some
effective.
mistakes. I wasn't in favor of the TJ Otzelberger hire. I think TJ's a great guy. He's been very nice to me. I hope it works out for him.
Right.
I don't think that's the guy that's going to turn this program around. And for the basketball side of it, I think you needed to hire somebody that is won, not at South Dakota State, but somebody who's won in the Pac-12, the ACC, somebody with a name. And she didn't do that. I believe she needs to do that with the football program. But anyway, getting back to what I said,
Right.
getting in the weeds here. What would you say to Francois if you had a chance to speak with her?
Well, I would first, again, echo the sentiment that it's important to me, and there's other people that it's important to, alumni that have been involved with the program, that have seen and been through tough times at the program, I'll say, that want better and that are still connected for whatever reason to the program. We all have pride in it, and I think it's a matter of tapping into that pride. I think it's incumbent on her and whoever else wants to get involved with UNLV football to tap into that, because as Tony did, there's a lot of resources available to this facility or to this program that you can
Now
tap
there is.
into to make things happen. So I think, one, I'd pay attention to that. That would be, I guess advice, if you want to say. Like, I'd want her to do that, and I'd also want her to invest herself into the program. I'd say that there's always room for more and to do more. And I think as the AD of a program, we've touched on it earlier, that at some of the things Tony did, usually at programs, you see the AD's name more involved with those things. I guess that would be something that I would like to see more.
So
is
you're
kinda
not
seeing that.
without blasting anybody. You just think she needs to put forth maybe a little bit more effort with some of the stuff that Tony Sanchez tried to do here.
I think there's ADing, and this is part of like head coaching or ADing at UNLV is different right now at this point in history than ADing or head coaching anywhere else, because there's already this kind of infrastructure in most of the places, these traditions, the way of doing things, kind of consistency. And I think somebody has to establish that at UNLV. And I think she can be the person to establish that. She's smart, she's savvy, she makes decisions, she does things, she thinks them through. She's a wonderful person from the encounters that I've had with her. But I just think you need to see that more consistently throughout the program. And I think she's making things kind of the way she wants them. She's shaping the university in a different way. And I think as long as she stays consistent on some sort of path, I think with what Tony's done as far as football and with the things that are going on around the program, I think she can be the consistency that the program needs, but she just has to do that, I think. And that would be the only thing I had to say to her.
A lot of rumors are, kind of being passed around that she is looking to climb the ladder, so to speak, as an athletic
Right.
director. And I think that her hiring of TJ Otzelberger, instead of not giving Mike Miller, who was going to take half the money, who was going to bring in an absolute guaranteed top 5 recruiting class for the next 3 or 4 years, not even giving him an interview just because she wanted to make her own decision and kind of make the safe hire. I hope she doesn't make a safe hire just to make herself look good for the next future job. Do you think that she is looking around, or think that she wants to stay at UNLV for the long haul?
I would hope that that's not the case. I would hope that anybody involved with the program understands it's a long haul job. And I think Tony understood that. And that's going back to Tony, that's why I wanted Tony to stay, is because I think he understood it's a long haul thing, and you need time and consistency to rebuild the thing from the ground up. It's not wanting to be those overnight projects. I think she needs to be here for the long haul for it to be successful. I think any shortcut that's taken, if it's taken with the prerogative of advancing your own career, it's going to kind of result in a program that's lesser than it could have been.
It's going to be half-assed every time.
Every time.
There's no way it can't be.
And that's kind of what I think Tony in his exit interview kind of said. He spoke to that there's been no consistency since he's been there.
Speaking
of
two
ADs under his tenure, 2 presidents, and with the university. This is not just football. This is like the whole university.
And you bring up a good point. What if we do hire? What if UNLV does hire a coach and he wins 9 games? They go 9-3, and Miami wants him.
Yeah.
And just like that, the coach is gone.
You built nothing.
That could definitely take place.
Yeah, it could happen. I mean, a guy could, because like I said, the roster could win. They could have won with Tony. The roster that's here could win. So this next guy could win, and it could be a stepping stone program for him. I think you look at a San Diego State type program, and you say Rocky Long's been there forever, and they're a winning program. They're a successful program.
Mm-hmm.
They have support. You know, they do what they do, and they do it well, and he's been there forever, and he's kind of been the most consistent guy in the Mountain West. You're not paying him a lot or nothing like that. He's making, under $900,000 a year right now. But he's there still, and you can build as long as he's there. And whoever takes over after him will kind of be, I could imagine, a part of the Rocky Long coaching tree.
There's a structure.
There's a structure in place for the next person. Right now, you don't really say there's a structure in place for anybody to come to UNLV. There's nothing in place. There's nothing built on.
Speaking of nothing in place,
great complex.
You played when, correct me if I'm wrong, was it Tina Kunzer Murphy that was the athletic director? Or
yes.
Was that? Okay. She was in overhead.
Yes.
Very nice
over,
lady.
Yes.
Very nice lady. I've spoken to her many a times. It's not personal. She had no idea what she was doing. Let's just call it for what it is. She
was the interim athletic director at one point. So
Jim
she was
Livengood
not
left.
Right. She wasn't supposed to be the long-term solution.
Yeah.
So I think
she definitely wasn't.
The interim kind of persona carried on even when she got it as a permanent gig. So
have you talked to Bobby Houck since you left the program?
I have not. I've talked to Tim Rosenbaugh, who was my offensive coordinator at that senior season where we went 7-5 and got to a bowl game. And in that winning season, attendance was still bad. Yeah, I would just point that out there.
It wasn't
great.
But
San Diego State game, it was my senior night. It was empty, and we were bowl eligible and everything for that game. But I digress. But no, I've kept in contact with Jay Staggs, who was a part of that coaching staff as well. He was a GA at the time when he was here in UNLV, but he went on and coached as well. We kept in touch. We talked during the alumni game or that San Jose State game. But I have not kept contact with Bobby Houck personally.
Any reason?
Not recently. I haven't. I mean, there's no reason. I mean, there's this whole like myth, I guess, or this. I kind of play into it too. It's kind of funny because there was a rift. Obviously, during my playing career, I absolutely disagreed with the fact that I was benched by him. Essentially, is what happened. I played poorly, and I blamed him for it. And I got put on the bench for somebody who was his guy, his recruit, and Nick Sherry coming in behind me. So while I was going through it,
who really wasn't very good, by the way.
He's a good guy. I love Nick.
Much better quarterback than him.
Right. So I got benched for what I thought was the wrong reasons, and so there was a bitterness about me during the time that I played or during the time of this happening. But I think giving up that bitterness and moving on and kind of assessing myself and bettering myself and getting a chance at redemption and playing that senior year, Bobby and I had a good relationship, a very workable relationship. I mean, I wasn't going to his house for barbecues or anything like that. Me and his son used to hang out all the time. His son was younger at the time, Robbie. We used to always hang out during practice. We had a picture of me and Robbie was his screensaver on his. We had a good relationship. Like that's.
You're not always going to agree on everything.
You don't agree, and I think that's there as a player to head coach relationship. There was times where it was rocky, and I think people joke about it and make fun of it now. But Bobby was never malicious to me or nothing like that. I never would wish anything bad on him or anything like that.
No, I don't think you would.
Yeah, it's just a fun kind of draw that Brian Feldman kind of plays with me about it in the
That's
relationship.
All right.
But yeah.
So we only got like 2 minutes left here to go.
No
Let me ask you this final question about who the next hire should be. Look, you hired Bobby Houck. He had never coached as a head coach at the D1 college level. To me, that's an issue. Didn't mean he couldn't be successful here, but he wasn't. You hired Tony Sanchez, who had never coached a lick of college football. It did not work out for him here.
Right.
I personally believe you have to hire a coach, whether it's a big name or not. Hire a coach that has plenty of head coaching D1 experience. Somebody who you can say, well, he won there. He was successful there.
Right.
Maybe he'll be successful here. Do you agree with that?
I agree with Division I experience. I don't think it necessarily has to be head coaching
Could be an
experience.
assistant,
I think
right.
it could be coordinator experience
That's
at a high
fair.
level. And that we talked about off air. Morgan Scalley is one of the names that pops up to me. I think he's been a coordinator and a successful coordinator with Utah. I mean, there's one of the top ranked teams in the nation right now, fighting to be in the championship. So I mean, why not? If you can get that guy in the door, I think so. I think what UNLV needs to do is get a head coach that is also a coordinator. I think that would help with some divvying up the responsibilities. I think because the coordinator spot is something that's more important than I think people realize, especially for UNLV going into this season where they have the Fertitta complex. They kind of have an identity offensively, at least with the skill set that they're going to have. You need somebody that fits that bill. I think
we agree.
Morgan fits that, and I think Jim Moore Jr. had been thrown around there a lot, but I don't know that you need a name like that at the head coach.
Just
I think
somebody
you
with
need
experience at the college level.
somebody that's going to be
That's
hands-on
fair.
with coordinating either side of the ball. So
Well, I'll tell you
that's what I
something.
want.
I'll tell you something, man. Whoever they hire, we're going to want to get you back on and get your reaction to it. Caleb, I always appreciate it when you
course,
join
man, of
us and
course.
come in, your expertise. I'm telling you, man, you have a bright future ahead of you when it comes to doing radio and to being a color commentator of college football. You do a great job for UNLV.
Thank you.
And we
appreciate it.
really appreciate it. Caleb Herring joining us in studio. Okay, folks, it has been a fun week. JD, I'm ready for my weekend. We're going to have some fun. We're going to go to Ellis Island tonight, their new beer garden. We're going to have a good time. But Sean Hannity, coming up next, he will be covering everything. That is the Donald Trump impeachment inquiry coming up next. Have a great weekend,
Thanks a lot,
everybody.
Caleb.